Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Google Plus Hangout. This time around, we are looking at internet shutdowns in Africa, its impact, of course. We've been joined by Moses Karanja. He joins us from Kenya. Moses, thanks for joining us today on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, so let's first of all look at how important the internet is to the development of Africa.
So, when we think about the internet, at times we may not quite appreciate how core it is to our very survival society. So that occasioned by people not exactly knowing what the internet is, or, how the internet works. So coming from a very technical point, you're excluding a huge number of people who may not know where the internet even came from. So when people just see, oh, I connected to the internet, they just think it's just that the browser I'm connecting to it. But the mechanics behind it actually can help us understand how the internet is important to our development as a continent. If we look at it from an analogy, which I like giving, that of roads and infrastructure. So if you think about roads and the way they are connected and how you can transport goods from, say, your estate to another country through a port, this is just how the internet works. The more connected a country is in terms of infrastructure and roads and rail and airports, that's also, you get countries that are well connected infrastructure, they are much more economically connected. And that is the same thing with the internet. So when you hear that maybe Africa average connectivity is around 25 or 30%, that means in terms of road, we are reaching only to 25% of the population. The more we get people connected to the internet, the more we are covering them in terms of our hypothetical road infrastructure. Now, about a situation where now roads have been cut off and people cannot move goods from one point to the other, doctors cannot move from their homes to the hospitals to treat patients, ambulances cannot be dispatched, humanitarian aid cannot be delivered. That is the same situation that happens when you turn off the internet. So the long and short of this is that because of the connectivity capacity of the internet, our very economic, social, political development depends due to the increasing interoperability. When you think about a company setting up in Nigeria, for example, like Jumia, which is selling online merchandise, Jumia depends on those virtual roads to bring goods to you by advertisement, by having other people like say who would not necessarily sell on other platforms do that. So the more we depend on the internet, the more critical it becomes in terms of its effects when it's disconnected. So that is how I would see it. Look at the internet from a road perspective and then transpose that to the internet and see what would happen if you don't have roads in your country, or if you don't have airports, or you don't have marine ports.
Okay, so given that analogy, we've had issues of the internet being shut down in some African countries. How much of a setback or a drawback is that to the African development, like you just made mention, that internet can help happen?
So the African Union recently, under Dr. Nkosazana, laid out the 2063 development plan, which is the next 50 years. How do we want it to have developed? And you look at the key pillars around it, you'll find that information communication technology is indeed a supporting pillar of everything that is needed. When intra-Africa trade and like one-stop point of revenue recovery, like when you're moving goods from one country to the other within a common market, you want to be sure that you're doing this extremely very fast. And and pharmaceuticals deployment across the continent, you're talking about connectivity and the layer of the roads, because of course you will always need real infrastructure running, so you need rails and all. But on top of that, you need the internet for communication and connectivity. that will now mend in all those kind of operators. Now think about all those grand ideas that people have of 10% GDP growth, bringing the workforce. When you cut off the internet, what you're doing is that you're betraying yourself. You are poisoning the very idea that you have started on. The continent have all these grand ideas about development. For example, in Kenya, we have Vision 2030. We are currently designing the third midterm plan. And when now you hear of internet shutdowns, it is like cutting off a huge chunk of your rail, like we just launched here in Kenya from Mombasa to Nairobi. After doing all that work of building a rail at a very expensive in terms of time and economic costs, then all of a sudden you just decide nobody will use this rail, we are going to cut it off because apparently we have elections, because we have political protest. So that for me explains internet shutdowns, which are so rampant, especially because of how people are moving. There's a significant movement from offline to the online, and so of course that presents a dilemma for states. On the one side, you are gaining economically a lot in terms. There is this conviction that for every 10% of a population you connect to the internet, 2% GDP growth rate are always observed. And so when you have that kind of beautiful scenario for states, you be like, okay, perfect, this is where we should all go. Then all of a sudden, internet shutdowns, which tells you maybe insecurity from the governments that are shutting down the internet, are much more powerful than the desires of economic development, at least as we see it.
Okay, so I mean, from all that you said, I'm believing that you're viewing this as much maybe in the same, so to speak now, in the same respect as a coup d'etat to a civilian government. But then, you know, when things like this happen, there's always some reason behind it. Some might say maybe it's for insecurity reasons, or some might say, like the last one we had in Ethiopia, it was because the kids or the students were writing examinations. How valid would you say the reasons for the shutdowns have been so far?
So if you look at the data, we have been trying to document these institutions, and also with organizations like Access Now, who have an interesting program called Keep It On. All the shutdowns we have experienced in Africa, even those moments where you hear that we start to be leaked on the response of the internet and with exams. Last year, when the country was preparing to go into the exam grade 10, the country was mired in political protest. The Oromia community felt like they had been for long marginalized and were fighting back. They requested the government, like, hey, instead of having this exam now, after after our students in our region have been disadvantaged for all these months not going to the classrooms, so they were not studying, and then you expect them to have the same exam with these other kids across the country. Why don't we postpone it, and then we can prepare our students properly so that they can have a fair chance in this competition, or maybe in this examination. So after the government refused, the Addis Ababa government refused. And these guys felt, okay, let's also pull out a civil disobedience act. They leaked the exam on Facebook. So the government was not responding to the fears of the exam being leaked online just out of the blues. It was a political issue that found its way to online exams and internet. So look at all the internet shadows that are happening. You will see that countries that are shutting down the internet are either going to the elections, there are political protests, or everything that is tied to the justification given is somehow tied to the political experiences that countries have.
All right. So how can we move past this? I mean, you talked about the document adopted by the African Union, which talked about the Afrinic, where they're threatening to shut down countries who actually shut down the internet during some of these things. But okay, so just before you answer that, let's take a quick break and then you come back.
Okay, thanks.
All right, very well. So, like I said before the short break, yeah, we're looking at the Afrinic document which you actually talked about earlier on. Do you think it is a right step in the right direction, talking about having to shut down countries that shut down the internet during protests or any events that you said earlier on?
So to the extent that the proposal was meant to raise this issue, at least on the international front, I think it has succeeded. And I think it's a good move, trying to use all means possible to have the government listen as to why it does not make sense to shut down the internet. However, when you think about denying a country internet resources like domain names, as a way of fighting back against internet shutdowns, don't you also think you're also throwing too much of saying, it's like you're bombing a place just because you differed with someone inside there. So when you deny a country internet resources, you're denying the citizens access to the internet. And as such, you're also not, you're also doing just the same, just like the government is doing by shutting down the internet. The long and short of this is, from my perspective, it's good to raise these issues. It's good to threaten countries about it. But fundamentally, we should not be looking at solutions or options that will kill off or will take off populations outside the internet. We should be more looking into how can we say increase internet penetration in a country and see the political elite or the decision makers actually see the value of having internet, such that when you switch off the internet, you are compromising everything that your country is organized around. That, for me, increasing access to the internet actually can turn out to be the way of dealing with these issues of internet shutdowns, because the country will be so connected to the internet that taking yourself out, one, will take a lot of resources. You will need to convince over 1,000 key decision makers so that the whole country is disconnected. However, that said, I would want to say when you have a country that does not listen to anyone or just acts unilaterally around some of issues like connectivity and communication, like Ethiopia, for example, there's only one internet connection, one internet service provider. There's only one national broadcaster. I mean, there's one national broadcaster, and opposition or any private company trying to broadcast is a problem. So the communication landscape in that country is extremely hostile and very closed. So what you want in such a country is to threaten them that actually you will be out of the global network and global connectivity. You cannot attract foreign direct investments, or companies are leaving your country, or international organizations are relocating to neighboring countries. Those kind of things probably would have a much more impact in enforcing an idea around how the country should deal with issues of internet shutdowns.
All right, so just before we go, some say that internet shutdowns harm human rights, and let's just keep it to human rights. I mean, how true is that, and how can you say that internet shutdowns actually harm human rights?
So on the one side, let me first from the economic human rights angle, because I think that's important. A lot of studies have been done. Indeed, we're also doing one more study to show how when you shut down the internet, the economic costs associated with that. And economic human rights, things like access to markets, or access to fairly priced goods, or access to information that helps your business make rational decisions. All that is important. But I guess where we need to put much more effort is around the freedom of expression area when it comes to not having options around the internet. As one, internet is very it lowers incredibly the barriers to entry of information or economy and all. So a lot of people prefer the internet to communicate more than they would, traditional means due to the cost and the efficiency. Now, when you then deny people that, yet they have moved their resources and their dependency level is extremely high on the internet, then what you're doing is you're denying people actually, just directions around how that they can use the internet. So I would be very much interested in seeing how can we talk about human rights, not just from economic angle, but also from okay, cut me a bit, please. So, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Hello, Victor.
Yes, I can hear you, Moses.
Yes, so great. So I'm saying when we talk about human rights and internet shutdowns, we should look at it from a very comprehensive point, both from freedom of access, freedom of information, freedom of association, economic, determination. There should not be that sense of discrimination, economy suffering. Human rights will come in secondary, or human rights are central, economics will come second. I think these are all interconnected and feed from each other. So we should look at it from a comprehensive point of view. Think about when journalists are arrested, like say in countries during protests. When you arrest journalists and then they cannot express themselves online, they flee the country. When you take off now the last remaining beacon of hope for information flow in that country, what you're doing then is you're killing off any alternative voice, and that will have its ripple effects in the human rights ecosystem and the very idea of social existence.
All right, so let's take a look at some figures. In 2015, I think we had only about 15 shutdowns documented. In 2016, it grew to 56. I mean, yeah, that's a sad number. How do we stop this? And we're having some this year from Cameroon, Ethiopia. I mean, how do we ensure that this, moving forward now, this doesn't continue in wrapping up?
Well, let's think about increasing access. If you look at most of those countries that have shut down the internet, they have done so in areas where connectivity or internet penetration rates are very low. Increases, the harder it is to shut it off. At least that's something I can, we can even look hypothetically, even from the data that we have, and say, look at Ethiopia, internet penetration rate. Look at Cameroon, the region that they shut off, one of the lowest in Africa. The Gambia, the regions, during the elections, are one of the lowest in Africa. Look at the countries that have also gone to elections but never shut down the internet. Or look at Ghana, huge internet. So sorry. Shutting down the internet.
Sorry, I lost you for a minute. Your internet was freezing.
I'm saying if you have higher internet connectivity, it's so hard to shut down the internet. Even for moments. Ghana, for example, went to the elections, but turning off the internet would have been much more catastrophic than actual. If you look at Ethiopia, for example, the internet, because they know the people who will be affected, the businesses which will be affected, as high compared to other forms of communication systems, like shutting down the city. Is one sure way of increasing incidences of internet shutdowns. One would be to increase internet connectivities in those countries. Number two would be, the commitment from other countries in Africa. Africa has not been talking much about this, to push back against these countries that are switching off the internet, and maybe other international communities. World Health Organization, which recently got an African Director General. Probably they should, put pressure, because health systems are affected by internet denial. So the moment you have pressure coming from all different directions, then hopefully sense can come home, and internet shutdowns can be a thing of the past.
Okay, very well. Even though we didn't really get you on the last on this last comment you made about the on this last comment you just talked about now. So if you can, I mean, just for the sake of clarity, just come again, please.
Okay. Maybe if you just give me a minute now.
Okay, sure. What's the question?
Okay, I guess I'm back now.
Okay, good. Yeah, I can see you. I can see you. I know you're back. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. So
okay.
all I'm saying is for us to increase, responsiveness and sensitivities from governments that are, thinking or practicing such drastic measures as internet shutdowns.
Yeah.
Pressure from all sides, especially strategic business partners. So think about direct foreign investments coming into countries, and then they know, if we go to say country X, we will not be assured that our offices in the HQs back wherever it is they're coming from can connect to that country directly. Think of say the United Nations and all the countries that are doing this. That kind of pressure hopefully can bring to bear the sensitivities around why internet shutdown is counterproductive even to the ends being sought by such governments. Number two, which I raised, was increasing internet access, in terms of infrastructure, capacity building around helping people understand why they need the internet. The more you increase internet access, the less you are likely to have internet shutdowns. I gave the example of Ghana and their elections last year, and I gave the example of a country like the Gambia, just both in West Africa. If you compare the internet penetration rate of those countries, you can tell where you have lower connectivities, you have higher chances of internet shutdowns happening. And of course, these things have their own political and social context. Countries with low internet connectivity rates most likely have political concerns in those countries. So you have a country like Ethiopia, which has one of the lowest connectivity rates in Africa. Not that they don't have the capacity to deploy connectivity across the country, but it's deliberate choice around control of communication systems. So that's my point. Let's increase internet access, and also let's increase pressure from as many partners across the world as possible.
All right, then, like you said, let's increase pressure from every angle and every angle possible. But then we have to wrap the conversation here. Moses Karanja joined us from Kenya, Nairobi, precisely, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in Nairobi.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us on the impact of shutdowns, internet shutdowns in Africa.
Thank you.
Of course.